Pretty good, pretty busy.
I'm sorry about bothering you on a busy day then.
No, no, they're all busy, so it's okay.
Okay. Do you mind if I record this interview?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you so much. So just starting out, can you tell me a little bit about you and your husband? What do you both do?
What specifically?
What do you guys both do? Are you both from Austin?
Sure, yeah. One second here.
No
So
worries.
we're not from Austin. We've only lived here for about a year and a half. We moved from Washington, D.C. He spent more or less his whole life there. I've moved a whole bunch of times. Um, and we both work in different technology startups.
Very cool. So where do you currently live?
We live off East 11th, across from Franklin.
Okay. Why did you decide to live there? Was traffic a consideration in your selection of a home?
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to, both of our jobs are, in Austin, kind of Austin proper, so we wanted to live in convenience of both downtown, of kind of bar, restaurants that we like, and then, general amenities of the apartment complex was important.
How far do you and your husband live from the places that you work?
I'm about almost 2 miles, and he's really close. He's got, I don't know, like a quarter mile at best.
Oh, very cool. Do both of you still drive to work, or do you take alternative transportation methods to get to work?
I bike, and he usually walks.
Do you mind me asking how much rent is typically at the building that you live at?
Sure. We have a roommate, so it's divided 3 ways, but our unit is like $2,300.
What are the demographics of most residents that kind of live in that building or live in the area that you live in?
It's pretty mixed, I would say, but they're all relatively young, late 20s, early 30s, probably multiple people living in each unit. There's some older families, but it's a relatively new complex, so I think, more or less people that are new or, haven't really lived in Austin a ton of time.
Do you think that most of them also choose to live there for similar reasons that you guys chose to, kind of proximity to work, proximity to downtown?
Yeah, definitely.
So how do you feel about traffic in Austin and just about the general infrastructure that Austin has?
I think it's kind of crap. So the biggest issues I have are, there's just a lot of outdated infrastructure, just roads, general bike lanes. People seem to be pretty terrible drivers, and I'm from the East Coast. Like 95 has like the highest accident rate in this country, and I still think people are pretty terrible drivers here. So trying to make sense of it all. I'll give you an example. A good friend of mine was hit on his bike last Friday, totaled his bike. He's okay. My other friend was hit in a hit and run accident where she was crossing the street in downtown Austin and was hit by a car.
Wow.
Which is just blows my mind that anybody could hit somebody and not, think twice about stopping and calling the emergency room and stuff. But, she had to she was in the ER and trauma and all this stuff. Like, it was actually pretty bad. Luckily, she's okay.
I'm sorry
But,
about that.
yeah, I think some of the problems are, you have the city. This is more me venting than me having done research on this, but you got to wonder, there are other, in other countries and other cities, they do things to control traffic light patterns, for example, so that it encourages people not to run red lights, so that people actually stop and they know they're not going to be waiting that long. If you set lights on, let's say, 10, 15, 20, 30-second intervals, for example, and consistently throughout the city, throughout major thoroughways, use maybe 15th, 11th, 7th streets, for example, there could be, it sort of encourages behavior that people will actually listen and follow if they don't think they're going to be waiting at lights. Whereas here, the lights are super inconsistent, and the time frame and the why they turn at certain places doesn't seem to really map out to general peak times of traffic. So I think it actually encourages negative behavior. Same with, this is a transient city, and so it happens to give a lot of different driving styles put into one city. You also have limited public transportation options for people, so there is a lot of, probably way too many cars on the road for what the city was initially equipped for. So to me, it feels like there's probably multiple solutions, but one being either invest in more public transit for people, or you build out the infrastructure so that it supports more of like the mass traffic sort of congestion that you have going through the city. I guess they did put in the Austin B-cycles around the city, and I've been noticing more of those popping up, which is a good thing. But getting the word out there about using them and offering promotions and stuff like that, it felt like you very much had to know that it was happening, or you didn't know that they exist,
Mm-hmm. So some of those things that you mentioned, are those implemented in Washington, D.C., where you came from? I understand that Washington, D.C. also has pretty bad traffic, is pretty high up on the list of cities that suffer from traffic.
It does. They've done a lot in the way of building out. There's a metro. Their buses are great there. They're consistent. They spent a lot of money building out bike lanes in the city. Their bike share program was early on in the country. Like, I think Philly probably was the first. Maybe San Francisco and Washington, D.C. was pretty early adopter of the bike share program. They also do, I'm sure Austin, I think Austin has a bike to work day, but, there's just a lot of publicity and effort around conservation and alternate ways of travel. They've also built the neighborhoods in the city in a way that makes it easy for people to get, into the major part of downtown, even if you're living in the burbs. So I think there's just, overall, there was a higher expectation of mass congestion and planning because of it. And it's a much older city, too, right? Nation's capital. So I think time has been a factor for that development, too.
Do you feel that traffic and commute is a bigger problem for people who are forced to live further away from jobs downtown, for example, or people who live in gentrified Austin neighborhoods, which are just kind of further away from the locations that most jobs are located at?
Can you repeat what was the?
Yeah, sorry.
I heard all that. What was the question related to it?
Yeah. Do you feel like traffic and commuting is a bigger problem for people who are forced to live further away from jobs downtown in areas like Riverside or in gentrified Austin neighborhoods, which are further away from where many of Austin jobs are located at?
Sure. I can't really speak. It was very intentional that we chose to live downtown. I used to live off East Riverside, but still relatively close to downtown. So, for me, I just didn't want to have a commute. So I'm willing to pay the difference and not have one versus living further out and having a commute. We also only have one car. So if we both had to commute for jobs, that would be sort of an issue at this point.
That makes sense.
I don't know. There's all sorts of reasons people live outside, right? If they're looking at school districts, if they have kids, if they're looking for space or dollar per square footage, stuff like that. There's lots of different reasons why people would probably choose to live in a certain area that forces them to have to drive because there's not an alternative.
When you lived in East Riverside, did you encounter more Austin traffic kind of driving into downtown where you work?
No, I have more where I live now.
Okay, very cool. I think, one last question. My team member, Kristen, she said that we could contact Brittany and Clayton Lane about any further sources for the story. Could I possibly have their emails or mobile numbers so I can possibly reach out to them?
Yeah, I think I'd want to know, I gave her an example only because they have worked in transportation their entire life. And, you know, they actually were the original founding people who started bike share program in Philadelphia. So I know this is a subject that they're very, very, very well versed in. I think probably what an easier option would be if you have a couple of questions that you want them to answer. You know, Clay is the CEO of the company. Brittany is also a senior manager. They're just pretty busy people, and I think I'd prefer if I would send them that information, and then I can also ask them, you know, if they want to get on the, if they have a few minutes to get on the phone, and we can try to set it up that way.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Yes, I would totally want to accommodate their schedules. I understand they're busy, as are you. So I really appreciate you being accommodating and letting me send some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's awesome that you guys are doing a project on this. I told Kirsten, I was like, this is something that's super needed, and I'm just, like, academically curious, and I've always been interested in kind of sustainable transport, so it was no problem for me. I think, you know, and I also don't have a problem making an intro for Brittany or Clay. I just think I'd want to know a little bit more, like, if you could lay out the questions that you want to ask them, I can give them some better context so that you'll get, you know, a response that'll be helpful and in the time frame that you need it to.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and you had really, really valuable input, and I think it's a really important voice to our story, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So what's your goal for this project? Is it journalism? Is it like a research, or are you actually proposing a, I don't know, policy amendment or something? Like, what's the
I think what we wanted to do was to talk about traffic and commuting as a whole, so it's kind of a multimedia project. So there's video components, and then the part that I'm working on, this particular, is the feature. So I just kind of wanted to flesh out like an overall like what the situation is with traffic, what the Austin government is doing, and then like kind of different issues like the public safety issue of emergency services being able to reach residents, and then just talking about the different aspects of this issue. So I'm writing the feature part, so that's mine, and then we're doing photos and videos and other parts. So I don't know that we're particularly trying to petition anything or to like, I guess, come up with a solution, but we want to kind of paint a deeper picture of what causes Austin traffic and what's being done right now throughout the city, whether that's in tech industry or through government or through local efforts to kind of remedy those issues.
Interesting. You know, again, I don't know a ton of what your project involves. Maybe another interesting thing to look at is how it affects senior population. You talked about like access to services and stuff. A lot of like, you know, the elderly community and stuff actually care about the same things that millennials do. I mean, they care about, you know, walking to things, accessibility to food and water and shops and stuff like that. So in terms of rounding out your demographic, they might be an interesting segment to look at too.
That is really interesting. I actually have not thought about that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Could I ask a favor? Just again, I'm just purely curious.
Yeah, of course.
I love it if people are actually documenting the stuff. When you guys are finished with your project, could I see a cut of it?
Yes, of course. We can definitely send you a copy of it as soon as it's done.
Awesome.
Yeah, of course.
Cool. Well, you know, good luck with everything, and you know, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm here, so it's not a huge inconvenience or anything. And if you want to send me a couple of questions that you'd like to hear from kind of